Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I have someone who has a very interesting company in a very interesting part of the world, especially maybe interesting to me because it's right here in my own backyard in the Silicon Slopes. And as you know, I've been paying special attention because I love Salt Lake City. We moved here about 5.5 years ago. If you listen, you probably know that. And one of the things that I'm just really happy and excited about is the vibrancy of particularly the tech ecosystem, but actually the whole Utah business ecosystem is a tremendously strong, robust ecosystem and has been doing really, really well for quite a long time. So I'm excited about talking to some of the leaders in this ecosystem and getting underneath what is driving the success of what's called the Silicon Slopes. So with me today is Ben Cahoon from Techcyte. And Ben, welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you today.
Now I see a slot canyon behind you from the Red Rock country. Is that a personal picture? Have you been there?
Yeah, actually, we're actually going there this weekend. So there's a whole bunch of canyons down. Well, there's literally thousands of slot canyons, but that one's a picture of Little Wild Horse. It's super popular down by Goblin Valley State Park.
Right on, Goblin Valley State Park. So, I think that's one of the things that has been driving the success of a lot of the business, just the business in general in Salt Lake City and in Utah, is there's such great outdoors. So it's really attracted people who love to be outdoors, companies who want to give their employees, that kind of a perk. But I also know that beyond place, a number of the companies that I've talked to, including yours, are very heavily virtual, and your company is actually virtual first. Is that correct?
Yeah, we call it remote first. It's patterned after. Yeah. We had done it. I had done it at a previous company actually here in the valley. It was called Land School. We never had an office, and that was from 2006 to 2013. And so we knew it was possible. The pandemic really, helped our leadership at Techcyte decide that it was time to take the step and go remote first with Techcyte.
Good. I want to come back to that because I think that's a super important aspect of our conversation. But first, let me just ask you if you ever had a leader that you really had an impact on you, because arguably you've been pretty successful. Why don't you tell us quickly about Techcyte? Tell us what you do, tell us where you are. And then I'd love to hear if there's somebody that had an impact on you on the way to this and what you learned, that kind of thing.
Sure. So Techcyte is a really interesting company that has a lot of Utah roots. It came as a tech transfer out of the University of Utah.
Great.
So one of a famous Utah entrepreneur, Ralph Yarro, was talking to the tech transfer office, and he met a doctor at he was at ARUP called Dr. Salama, Dr. Mohamed Salama, and the concept of Techcyte was to take digitized blood smears, send them to the cloud, analyze them using machine learning, and then return the results back to the lab or the doctor. Mm-hmm. So that concept has expanded into Techcyte, which really is that same concept, but applied to 3 different verticals. One is the veterinary market, and we can talk more about that. The other is the human healthcare market, and then the environmental market. So we basically take liquid-based samples like blood, fecal, urine, pap smears, those types of samples. We digitize them. They go to the cloud. We build a platform that then uses cutting edge, deep learning, machine learning technology to analyze them, return the results back to the technician who confirms it, and then that goes into the medical record.
Wow, cool. Great. So tell me some of the advantage of this for people that are using it.
Sure. So the core advantage, there's really no advantage to just digitize glass slides, to digitize samples.
Sure.
And the real ROI, the benefit comes from the machine learning and the workflow that then is put around that machine learning. The primary goal and benefit of this type of a technology is increased accuracy and increased efficiency for the lab. If you look at environmental, veterinary, and human labs across the world, the, the younger generations are going into molecular, right? They're going into genetics. They're not going into in big numbers looking at things in a microscope.
Right.
So the whole art around microscopy is difficult right now, because not many young people are going into it, and so there's a lot of people are retiring, and it's a very difficult job to find little small things that look very similar to their surroundings in a microscope. So it takes a lot of training. And so our benefit to there is we put all that training into a machine learning algorithm, which then can enhance a lab's ability to do more samples and get it right.
And am I correct in assuming that this is also over time just a big data play to better understanding of the things that you're looking at?
Well, at the end of the day, the way machine learning is algorithms are created in this area, it's all visually based. So we take hundreds of thousands of images, put those into a machine learning algorithm, that the machine learning algorithm then learns the features of each of those different things. Let's say something like a giardia, right? It's going to learn what a giardia looks like under different conditions, under different stains and microscopes and scanners, and then it figures out how to identify, this is a giardia troph, and crawl that image and return the things that most look like giardia trophs to the user.
Yeah, good. Cool. So, this is one of those things that I've been talking about a lot lately. Actually, it kind of comes because of the Russia's war against Ukraine, and don't take offense to this, but this is one of those things that I call mundane, where mundane means freaking real power. I get really excited about things, and particularly technologies that do something that is quote unquote mundane, and yet it means it's everywhere. It means everybody needs it. And that gives it just an incredible value and power. Yeah. So is that fair?
Yeah. No, that's fair. We in the first phase of machine learning, we are automating mundane tasks. They're difficult tasks. So the people who know how to do this today are very, very skilled, but that can be automated to help them. Eventually, when we get to phase 2 and phase 3, we'll be able to weed out the negatives. So at some point, you won't even have to look at the negatives. You'll just be looking at positives. And then eventually, down the road, you'll be able to just call it. Now, the AI will just be able to call it.
Yeah.
And then you'll start getting to other solutions where it's not just automating a task, but it's actually creating a new way to solve a problem. Like we'll take something like sepsis. Sepsis is a worldwide problem. It literally costs the world billions of dollars. I think 6 million people a year die of sepsis.
Yeah.
And when you go to the ER, you don't know whether you've got the flu or you've got sepsis. And it takes about the gold standard on the market is about 4.5 hours today. It's actually by a Utah company, BioFire, that was bought by Mario.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a great test. In about 4.5 hours, you can tell, but hours matter.
Yes.
And we're hoping that with this technology, we may be able to get a 5-minute blood smear test to be able to tell whether you're going to be septic or not. And that's where really exciting things are going to happen as this technology evolves in the future.
I mean, and it's so exciting. And one of my dear friends is a woman named Melinda Richter. And I started working with her back when she had a company called Prescience. And she went on to be acquired by Johnson & Johnson. And now she's the global head of Johnson & Johnson Innovations J Labs, which is a no strings attached incubator set of incubators all around the world, growing, bringing amazing stuff into the world. And her story is that she was, on the fast track at a telecoms company and fast track to leadership, going all over the world, doing different jobs to get to know the whole company and was, earmarked for leadership. And she was in China working for a little while, walking across a park. She got bitten by a bug. By that afternoon, she was in the hospital. By that evening, they were saying, you need to call your family because we don't think you're going to make it. Right. And she was like, can you tell me what I have? And they're like, we don't know. And she's like, wait, I'm about to die. And you don't even know what I have. And she sat there in her bed, laid there in her emergency room bed, thinking about how like she'd been all excited that morning because her company, she was part of the group that was working on how to buy a Coke from a cell phone with a cell phone, right? From a vending machine. And that was the big deal, And now she was like facing this massive gap in our ability to take care of people. And she said, if I live through this, I'm going to do something about this. I am going to change this. And so she created Prescience, got acquired by Johnson & Johnson, is now making a massive impact with this. But that, you're doing that thing. You're a big piece of the solution that drove her into creating J Lab. So,
that's an amazing story. Yeah, I love. That's one of the things I absolutely love about Techcyte is we are not only we get to use cutting edge technology to solve really hard problems that are doing good for pets, for humans, and for the environment. And I you just don't want to have all that come together. It's pretty exciting as an entrepreneur and as a technologist.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's fabulous. It's super exciting. I mean, and just so nobody misunderstands what I meant, I mean mundane is a massive compliment. It's one of the daily fabric of life things that makes a huge difference that people need on an ongoing regular basis. And as you take these new levels, you're just going to get better and better and better at something like, at doing that. So,
yeah.
So Ben, tell me about a leader who had an impact on you.
Okay. Well, there is I don't know if you're totally familiar with the history of sort of tech here in Utah, with WordPerfect and Novell, and sort of that heritage, right? So one of my partners in the second company that I ran was called Land School, and his name is Dana Doggett. Dana was one of the very, very first engineers at Novell, and I got the opportunity to meet him. He was influential in helping me getting my first job out of school at Intel, and he became a lifelong friend and a mentor. And the lessons that I got from him were just core. Some of those lessons were, there's really only two types of people in this world: abundant people and scarce people.
Oh, yeah.
And life is too short to if you find yourself involved with scarce people, it's too short.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to be involved with people who are trying to make the pie bigger, that are willing to share and make things happen. So I have taken that and just tried to surround. If you look at Techcyte, it's a very, very unique culture. It's a very unique team. Probably the one of the best teams I've been involved with in my whole career. And it's because we're abundant people trying to just get things done. And I was a very, very key lesson. The other lesson that he taught me was you really can't understand how big a market is as a human, right?
That's really good. Yeah.
He was so funny. He would always think, oh, we'd sold our last piece of software. We had a company that we helped. It was, again, another one that made an impact. It was an educational company, and it was an education tech company. And so he was so funny because he was like, oh, we probably sold our last piece of software. And he was joking, but the markets are so big. We had multiple competitors. But we were able to sell that software around the world and make an impact on students around the world because, billions is billions is a big number, right? When you get to billions of people,
yep.
and your markets are in billions, it's really hard to comprehend that. And so, I don't focus a lot on the competition in early companies. We focus on making a great, simple, elegant solution for customers.
That's fabulous. I'm taking that. I'm going to I'm internalizing that on a new level for myself, for what I do. I think that's just so brilliant. And, it reminds me of one of the things when I'm working with people that I always point out, because one of my key things, Ben, is I say communicating with human beings is not logical. You may have noticed it's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again, but logic by itself, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And one of the things that I don't think that we understand as human beings, I certainly didn't get it at first, is the way human beings count. Here's how they count: 1, 2, 3, many. And after 3, it's just many, right? Which is why billions is just so different. Like at best, that's really big many.
Yep.
And 100,000, that's many. And, 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, they're just really big many's. And we just don't have intuition for that. So I think that's just a great quote. As a human, you really can't understand how big a market is.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
so it does affect your strategy, right? So you can get so caught up with, what are we doing against the competition? How are they reacting? And where you should just really focus on your customer, solve a problem that makes a difference to them, and go forward, and really not, you don't have to be so focused on what other people are doing.
Yeah, totally. Great. Good. So any other things that come up, like maybe one more thing that really stands out?
This one's sort of a software only one, but we took great care of I guess it's broader than software, but we took great care of our customers. Have you ever personally had a bug fixed for you? Like if you had a bug in I'm sure everyone's encountered bugs in software, right?
Yeah.
They just exist. But has anyone ever fixed one for you?
Yeah, no, not personally. Me personally. Nope.
Right. So we had a policy that if we were selling a piece of software that was only $600. Okay. And that was for lifetime.
Yeah.
So our policy was, if there was a bug in that software and we couldn't fix it over the phone or the internet, we would fly our top engineer to fix the problem. And what that did was it fixed problems for other people, right? Because if we fixed the problem for that one person, and you almost get a more loyal customer after you fix a problem for them.
Yeah.
And they've had a problem, right? So normally you think that's a really bad thing, right? We had a bug, we had a problem, it wasn't working for you. But if you're responsive and you fix a problem, and again, you act like a human being and work with them and fix it, then you're going to get a customer for life. And that's an amazing principle, I think, that applies. It is broader than just software, but software engineers and companies, we should fix bugs for people. That's
a really classic. You'd fly them out.
Yeah, we'd fly the engineer. He would jump on a plane and go and figure out what was wrong. And sometimes it was their fault. And other times it was core that a blind spot that we just didn't see, and it was ours. Yeah. And you never know. Until you get there and you get your hands on it, and you never know. So it went both ways, and overall it was very, very positive for the company.
When I had a company called bigwords.com, I almost, because I had to run customer service for a while, because, when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting, you just do whatever it takes. Right. And I almost thought that we should have a strategy where we caused everybody to have a problem so that we could take really great care of them, because then they become, I was clear that the people who had a problem that we took great care of, it strengthened our relationship, and it made them much more excited about telling their friends about us than if they just had a good experience,
Absolutely.
So that's classic. That's really cool. Well, so let's talk about about remote first. You know, I've been studying Matt Mullenweg a lot, and been thinking about this more for a lot of the larger corporations, you know, like places like, what does this piece of Boston Scientific do? What does this piece of Johnson and Johnson do? I think that you know, startups kind of have a little bit more flexibility and not quite such a big behemoth to, you know, turn around. But I think there's just so much valuable stuff coming out of the fact that we all had to go virtual. I think that was one of the golden linings of the pandemic or the silver linings is we all had to do it at the same time. So, because if it would have had to happen over time, piecemeal everywhere, it just wouldn't have had the same effect. But since everybody had to do it, boom, like pretty much everybody does it. Some people do it better. Some people do it worse. Some people understand it better. Some people don't. But we all got at least competent at it to a degree. But I think there's a whole different thing available when you make that, you know, when it's remote or when it's remote first, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you've noticed or done that have worked, or what, you know, tell us a little bit about your experience with
Sure. So my first experience with remote first was really that company with Dana. I had left.
Mm-hmm.
So Dana had started a company that became Intel in Utah. So it was the first Intel facility. So we all worked for Intel. When we left Intel and got to smaller companies again, we took all of those great concepts. Intel had a great culture, right? So we took a lot of that, applied it to our little company, and Land School never had an office. It was remote first before remote first was cool. This was in 2006. We were using Skype, and we learned how to do it, and it was very, very successful. And we eventually sold the company to Lenovo. But the thing that we didn't do, people always said, "Oh, you guys should write a book," but we didn't write a book. We didn't write it down. We just did it. And when we started Techcyte, we were together, right, in an office. The pandemic happened, and we found right at that time, we found GitLab. And GitLab is a remote first company that, unlike my previous company, they wrote it down and they've made that knowledge available to the world. So they've taken remote first to the nth degree. And I give them just tons and tons and tons of credit. So we found them, we took what they've done. One of the key things about remote first is it's basically an online living, breathing handbook that becomes the organizational knowledge of the company.
Yeah.
So everyone in our company, they all, the very first day, get a GitLab account. And the very first day, we want them to contribute to the value of the company by making a change. Now, that may be a spelling mistake initially.
Yeah.
One, you've got to, let's say you're an accountant. One, you've got to get in, you've got to learn how to use GitLab. You've got to learn how to do a merge request, which may be totally unfamiliar to them. But they get in, they do it. We've got training for them. And they find something where they can add value the first day. And that starts off a mindset of all of us working remote together, building something that's bigger than any of us, right? Yeah. I think as we look back at Techcyte, we'll look back and we created an organization that has value beyond even just the products that we create. And I think that's pretty cool. When you're building something, when one, we're doing good in the world, two, we're building cool stuff, and you're building an organization that's going to live past you, and create opportunity for many, many people down the road, that's pretty exciting. And I think that's one of the benefits of this remote first culture that GitLab created. The first thing we did was your values have to align with being remote first. Your hiring practices, your communication principles. We really had to take a look at the whole company and get all of those pieces aligned with our strategy to make it work. I think if you take a haphazard approach to remote first and don't really commit, I don't think you're going to gain the benefits or see the success. In fact, in many cases, I think it could be a disaster if you don't really think about it.
Did you guys have any screw ups or moment or like any painful lessons as you implemented this?
So one of the values that we have is iteration. And so absolutely, yes, we make mistakes every day.
Yeah.
And you're right. The purpose is to make mistakes quickly and then to not repeat them.
Yeah.
So we've made mistakes in communication. We've made tons and tons of mistakes. And the great thing about the company is there's no blame, right? So we do a lot of retrospectives and look back on what we've done and try to get better. And you're not blaming people. There's no blame in this. It's all about getting better.
Yeah.
So, man, we've made so many mistakes.
Is there one that stands out?
One that stands out with Techcyte. I don't know if there's one that stands out with Techcyte. We've had scary moments at Techcyte. We have all, like, I took everything. When I saw this company, I knew it was going to be something special. So I took my 401k. I took previous exits. I took everything and invested in Techcyte.
Yeah.
And there were some scary moments. What we're doing has never been done before. And so the AI was and is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
And so there's moments when, days where it does not look like it was going to work. And, the persistence and the creativity and, going back and back is really what makes it. Actually, one of the things, one mistake that ended up being just a huge benefit was around a fecal test. So the corporate strategy at Techcyte has been to focus on veterinary before human, because human's a regulated market. So it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
And if you just go after human first, you're going to have to raise lots of money and you're not going to own very much of your company when you're done.
Right. Yeah.
So we've gone after vet, and we've been very, very fortunate to partner with a company called Zoetis. Zoetis used to be Pfizer Animal Health. They went public as Zoetis. I think they're around $8 billion in revenue. They're just an amazing company in the veterinary space. They're pharma, diagnostics, and reference labs. And we had created a fecal product that looked for parasites in dogs and cats. Okay. And we had partnered with a local company here in Salt Lake, a local veterinary lab, and we had done the best we could with what we had. And we had created a test that was a sedimentary test, meaning when you take a fecal material and you spin it down, there's different liquids that you can use. And we had done a sedimentary test because we thought that was going to return the best results. We had met Zoetis. We had gone to this big validation with them back at Oklahoma State University. And it turned out, when we met the person at Oklahoma State University, she's an expert parasitologist, right? She said, I don't know if this is going to work. The gold standard is actually up. So we're trying to make the eggs go down, and the gold standard in the industry is to make them go up.
Right.
This was a major mistake. And can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was a major mistake. And luckily Zoetis gave us another chance. We went back to the drawing board, and it forced a whole series of iterations and R&D and just creativity to come up with a solution that then would float the eggs. And then when you float the eggs, there's all sorts of other problems, because then the scanner, when you float, you're only getting the microscopic eggs. There's nothing for the scanner to focus on.
Right.
So then we had to come up with a whole bunch of other innovations, and that led to patents, and that's led to a very, very successful product line within Zoetis that now does fecal and blood and fine needle aspirates and cytologies. And it's just, you've got to, as an entrepreneur, you've got to really be persistent and iterative, and there's a fine line between keeping the faith and being crazy, but you got to find that line.
Well, and Ben, that's one of the things that I realized kind of later in my entrepreneurial journey. It was when I started teaching and coaching and stuff that I learned this, because people always say it's about the team, right? Oh, we're investing in the team. And I used to think that meant, oh, well, we need somebody who worked at Google and somebody who worked at Apple, and we need somebody who went to Harvard, and I thought it was about the credentials. And yeah, that helps, but that's not what they mean. They mean, is the team going to be resilient and creative, and exactly the story that you just told, right? We had this big deal. We went and did the thing we were going to do. It didn't freaking work, right?
Yep.
We all were like, ah! But then instead of just going, oh, well, you went back and got massively creative and iterated and solved that problem. And that is what investors mean when they say we're investing in the team, right? It's
Absolutely.
not any particular solution, any particular product. It's your ability to just do this however it looks, right?
Yep.
So that's a great story. So tell us a little bit more about your thinking and your experience as someone who's leading in a remote first world. And here's what I'd love to focus you on is keeping the team motivated, keeping the team connected. Like how do you guys do that part?
Yeah, sort of the nuts and bolts, the day to day. So again, I go back to GitLab and they're just they do it right. It does come back to aligning your values, and one of the key values that affects is your communication methods.
Yeah.
So when we look at communication methods, how we communicate, it's very, very purposeful, and we have priority. Where we try to do a lot of, because we've got team members now across the world. We've got people in Luxembourg, the UK, Mexico, all across the United States. We're collaborating with people in China and just Latin America, all over. The way you communicate has to be different, because you can't, asynchronous meetings where we're talking like this are very, very difficult if you've got people spread out across the whole world. So writing and asynchronous communications is something that we look for as we're interviewing and bringing more people onto the team. We look for people that, number one, value remote first, but number two, can communicate and thrive in that type of environment. So if you write well and then and can communicate well through writing, that just becomes a huge asset in the company. Now, everything can't be asynchronous communications, right? We do have very purposeful synchronous communications. One of those is a monthly team meeting that we all get together, right?
Yeah.
We have daily stand-ups. We have just a whole series of meetings that help bring that teamwork together. And eventually it gets down, there's very few company-wide meetings, sort of like that once a month.
Yeah.
But there's lots of team meetings that happen. And so you don't really feel isolated. I mean, if anything else, we're trying to figure out ways to quit having so many meetings, right? You're engaged with people all day long, and you've got to find some time to do, to get some focused work where you can get in that, in the flow.
So Ben, what are some of the things that you personally think about when you're writing? Because I think one of the things, because I've been on the internet since 1987. And one of the things that really is just has been, I think, a consistent issue is that there's no nuance to the text. People, it's very easy to misunderstand what somebody means in an email or in a text, take it too harshly or whatever. What are some of the things that you think about? Do you think about that aspect much in your writing?
Oh, I think if you're not thinking about that all the time, you're going to make major mistakes, right?
Good point.
You've got to be
actually
thinking about it all the time, right? If you're angry, right, don't send that email. Right. And think about how it's going to be interpreted by other people. When you're writing, see this remote first handbook that we've created, as part of the GitLab infrastructure, it really forces you to think about taking information, what you a lot of us, you get unique information that you've learned, and you've got to figure out the best way to communicate that so that people can find it, right? Because finding it's a huge challenge. You got to be able to find it, and then it's got to be written in a way that is clear and concise and that's useful to other people.
Right,
So
but Ben, wait a minute. Like, I'm the one who knows it, and I want to keep that siloed so I have job security. I don't want to share this. I don't want anybody else to know this. I want them to have to go through me.
Yeah, that's not valued at Techcyte. I'll tell you right now. If you're not willing to, you just won't, like. We have annual reviews, right? I
Yeah.
actually came from, I mean, Intel did a pretty good job at that. In that annual review cycle, if you are a silo and you've held onto that information, you're not going to do well over time.
Yeah.
Right? We value information sharing and getting what's in your head out so that it becomes organizational knowledge.
Yeah.
That those type of people are going to do better in a remote first company like Techcyte
Yeah.
than someone who feels like they've got to hold it and create a kingdom, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, which is hard for some people, you know.
It is. And I think but that's where I think that's where the beauty comes in of a corporate strategy that's aligned.
Yeah.
Right? If you can start to, one of my favorite case studies at a business school was Southwest, right?
Yes.
Southwest has aligned not only their product strategy, right? Low cost with the type of planes, the type of people, it extends to their people and their culture.
Yes.
And once you get that all aligned, it becomes a barrier that's very, very difficult to pass through, right?
Yes.
Delta can never become Southwest.
No.
And we're trying to do that same thing at Techcyte, that we create something that we hire people, we have values, our corporate strategy all aligns to create something that's special, again, that's going to live past my time here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, you know, that's one of the things that I like about the military is that they're part of the culture is always be replacing yourself, right? One of my friends was the lead solo pilot for the Blue Angels, and you only get to do that for a little while. And when you come in as the lead solo pilot for the Blue Angels, you're like, almost the next day, you're already thinking about training your replacement. And that, I think, again, not to reference the war in Ukraine too much on this, it's happening as we're talking. That's one of the big differences between the Ukrainians who were trained by the United States and NATO versus the Russians is Russia is all about command and control, hoarding information, siloing, right? And they're just getting it handed to them on a platter by the Ukrainians who are interested in commander's intent and, what's the goal of the mission, not what are my particular orders, but what's the goal of the mission. And that taking responsibility at every level and replacing yourself all the time, making sure that information is not siloed, but spread around so everybody can be as empowered as possible. And I think it's a pretty interesting, really clear display for the whole world to see about how those two methods of leadership go up against each other, right?
Yeah, our CTO right now, Shane Swenson, those are the words that he uses. He uses empowered autonomous teams. Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to create. Right. Because as an entrepreneur, you start off where you've built it from the beginning, everything, and that's not good. Right. You've got to get that out and empower people. I think that's one of the struggles as we become a larger company. We've gone from, 30 people last year to we're just about to hit 100.
Yeah.
That transition of where the people who started it and have built it know everything to where you've got to get that knowledge out and create an organization that can repeat what you've done in the past. That's a tricky transition. And we're going through that right now. And I don't think we've done everything perfect, but we're definitely trying through that remote first iterative values driven culture to get it out to these empowered autonomous teams.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's never easier to influence culture than it was yesterday, right? And that means today is the best day, and tomorrow it'll just be a little more difficult because there's more people, things get more ingrained the way they are. And I think that those stories and that culture, having those convey the values and having the values be aligned, like you've been saying, I mean, that's how you do it. And it's not easy.
Yes, it has to be very, very purposeful, right?
Yeah.
If you're not purposeful about it and really thinking about it, then you're not going to be able to harness the power and get that aligned. You're not going to create a Southwest, right?
Yeah, right.
You just won't if you're not really purposeful and thoughtful about how you structure it.
So I know that we both have something coming up at the top of the hour. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that maybe I should have asked you, or anything that you just have been thinking about lately that is valuable that you'd like to share?
Overall, I think entrepreneurs and organizations that are trying to create value, if you can try to do good, I think you're going to make a bigger impact, right? I am just so impressed with people and organizations that get aligned to do something good and make a difference. That to me is the home run, and I hope that we as a country and as a world can really create organizations that do that make a difference and make a difference in people's lives.
Amen, brother. I'm just totally with you. I think the most exciting thing in my world is a company with a good business plan and a profitable strategy that's focused on making a difference in the world. Like, that is where all cylinders are firing. And I think that's how, if we make it as a species, that's how we're going to make it, I think.
Yeah. And you brought it. You brought it up. It has to be profitable. It has to be a good business model. All those things have to come together, and then the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great, Ron Finley gives a great TED talk, and he calls himself the Gangsta Gardener, and he's into urban gardening. And he says a brilliant line in his talk is, the funny thing about sustainability is you have to sustain it. And that to me is profitability. That to me is finding a niche in the market where you're doing good and you're making a difference for the world, and you can sustain it through being profitable.
Yeah, it makes money so you can keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and to loop it back to the beginning, I really think that the whole point of life's too short to hang out with scarcity minded people, that's a really great heuristic. And I think I'm always thinking about heuristics for things like hiring and growing the team and things, because that's a big part of the entrepreneurial journey. And I just want to toss something back to you. I just got to be at the Crew 4 launch down at Cape Canaveral, and it was absolutely amazing, and got to hang out with some of the astronauts, and Kjell Lindgren, who's the commander, invited me and my family down, and it made me think over and over and over, interacting with people the whole time we were down there. The final test to become an astronaut? Here's the final test. You got to pass a lot of tests, right? But the final test is, you go up to the astronaut room, the astronaut office, and you go into that big conference room, and they sit you down with all the active astronauts. They toss the binder of stuff that you've, done aside, and you talk with them for about an hour. And then at the end of the hour, they give you a big binder of all the tests you've already passed back, and you go out, and after you leave, they all talk about whether or not they like you. And even more importantly, do they think you are likable? And how did the test scores come back from your peers in those interactions that you've been doing the whole time as you've been testing to become an astronaut? And if you are not just incredibly likable, even if you passed all the other tests with flying colors, you don't become an astronaut. And I think this is a great, I'm going to now merge these things, right? Like, are they likable? Do they have an abundance mindset, right? Otherwise,
absolutely,
life's too short,
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's
good
awesome.
to know. And look, I mean, I've done startups. I did startups my whole life. And one thing I know for sure, under pressure, jerks become way more toxic. And boy, all a startup is a big, huge pressure cooker. So,
Yep.
everybody gets a little bit frazzled. And if you put a jerk in there to start with, man, it just ruins the whole dish. Well,
Great. Well, thank you.
Ben, it's really great to have you. Thank you for joining us here on SpeakLikeALeader.show. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you like, what you didn't like. I answer my emails and I would love to hear from you. And check out Techcyte, check out Ben Cahoon. And Ben, thank you so much for sharing this. It's starting to get clearer to me. I think one of the things that I'm starting to see as a pattern here in the Silicon Slopes is this just a commitment to doing good and a commitment to what I might call integrity and like having integrity and doing good things and making work a great place to be and having a mission that's bigger than you. And, that's all awesome. And thank you for sharing your unique angle on all this with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to come on the show and talk a little bit about Techcyte. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're super welcome. All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on SpeakLikeALeader.show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.